Say something. Say something.
This is your final warning. Only darkness ahead.
Verity may look like another Colleen Hoover adaptation on paper, but this one is playing a completely different game. Instead of another emotional romance, the new trailer gives us obsession, manipulation, hidden confessions, and one terrifying question at the center of everything. What if the story you are reading is actually a confession? Dakota Johnson stars as Lowen Ashleigh, a struggling writer hired to finish a best-selling book series after its famous author. Verity Crawford becomes unable to continue working. That job sends Lowen into the Crawford family home, and almost immediately, something feels wrong. Anne Hathaway plays Verity, and the trailer makes her presence feel unsettling even when she barely moves. Lowen is supposed to be there to study notes and finish manuscripts and outlines instead. She finds something much more disturbing: private pages, hidden messages, and descriptions of the Crawford family that read less like fiction and more like admissions. That is where Verity becomes interesting. Lowen is not simply trying to finish somebody else's books. She is trying to decide whether the woman who wrote them is telling the truth. The trailer repeatedly blurs the line between manuscript and memory. Lowen reads passages, then sees disturbing images that may represent what Verity wrote, what actually happened, or what Lowen is beginning to imagine. And that uncertainty is exactly what the movie needs. Psychological thrillers work best when the audience is forced to question the same evidence as the protagonist. If every disturbing detail is obviously real, there is no mystery. If everything is obviously imagined, there is no danger. Verity appears to live somewhere between those two possibilities. Josh Hartnett plays Jeremy Crawford, Verity's husband, and he quickly becomes another major source of tension. Lowen is drawn deeper into the family's history while also becoming closer to Jeremy, which immediately complicates every discovery she makes. If Verity's writings are true, Jeremy may be living beside someone dangerous. If they are false, Lowen may be destroying a family based on words that were never meant to be believed. And if Jeremy knows more than he admits, then Lowen may be the one walking into a trap. That triangle is the heart of the story. The trailer does not present Verity as a conventional villain. It presents her as a question. Is she helpless? Is she manipulating everyone around her? Is she aware of what Lowen is reading? And most importantly, is the manuscript a confession, a fantasy, or something designed to control whoever finds it? Anne Hathaway is a great choice for that kind of role because she can shift between warmth, vulnerability, and something much colder without changing much on the surface. The trailer seems to understand that, rather than relying on obvious horror imagery. Many of Verity's strongest moments come from stillness. A look, a pause, a movement that should not happen. A character standing in a place where she may not be supposed to stand. Those details can create more tension than a dozen jump scares. Dakota Johnson also fits the material because Lowen needs to feel intelligent but emotionally vulnerable. She is entering someone else's home, someone else's marriage, and someone else's story. The more she investigates, the harder it becomes to separate curiosity from obsession. That is especially important because Lowen is not a detective. She is a writer. Writers are trained to look for patterns, hidden meanings, contradictions, and emotional truth. But that same instinct can become dangerous when every document begins to feel like evidence. The trailer appears to lean heavily into that idea. Lowen reads Verity's words and starts seeing the world through them. And once that happens, the manuscript may become more powerful than reality. This is also why Verity is such a different Colleen Hoover adaptation. Movies like It Ends With Us and Regretting You were built around emotional relationships, trauma, and romantic choices. Verity takes those same interests in intimacy and turns them into suspense. Love becomes suspicion, marriage becomes a crime scene. And the question is no longer who should this person be with, it becomes who is lying. That shift could also help the movie reach viewers who have never read a Colleen Hoover novel. You do not need to be a fan of her romances to understand the appeal of a wealthy family hiding something inside a beautiful house. That setup is almost classic Gothic thriller territory. A stranger enters an isolated home. A powerful family controls the environment. A woman discovers documents she was never supposed to read. And every new answer creates another question Michael Showalter is directing, which is an interesting choice because much of his recent work has focused on relationships. Comedy and character-driven drama, that background may actually help Verity. The movie does not need to become a loud horror film. It needs believable relationships that become increasingly uncomfortable. If the emotional dynamics between Lowen, Jeremy, and Verity work, the thriller elements will become much more effective. If the manuscript is real, then Verity's entire public identity may be a lie, but if it is not real, then Lowen may be projecting something onto a woman she barely understands. That ambiguity is what the adaptation has to protect. The biggest mistake the movie could make would be explaining Verity too early. The trailer smartly avoids that instead. It shows Lowen becoming more isolated, more suspicious, and more emotionally involved in the Crawford family. We see secret messages, we see surreal images, we see moments where Verity appears to know much more than she should, and we see Lowen begin to question her own judgment. That is exactly where a psychological thriller should place us. Not in certainty, in doubt. What will Lowen do once she believes she knows the answer? That second question may be even more important, because Lowen is not simply observing this family from a safe distance. She is becoming part of it. Her relationship with Jeremy deepens. Her obsession with Verity grows, and every boundary between professional work and personal involvement begins to disappear. That makes revenge, attraction, jealousy, and fear almost impossible to separate. The best version of Verity will understand that the real danger is not one evil person. It is three people trapped inside different versions of the truth. Verity opens in theaters on October 2nd. I want to know what you think after this new trailer. Does this look like the Colleen Hoover adaptation that finally breaks away from the romance label? Or are you more interested in seeing Anne Hathaway play a character who may be far more dangerous than she appears? Because if the movie stays faithful to the central mystery, Verity could become one of those thrillers where the most frightening thing in the room is not what happened. It is the possibility that we may never know which version of the story was true.